There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, my guest today is Kathleen Marsden. She's one of the world's foremost authorities on UFO and non-human intelligence. She's the author of several books featured on camera, commentator, international lecturer. She's earned a BA degree in social work and worked as an educator, an education service coordinator while attending graduate school. She's a practitioner of regression, hypnotist, quantum healing, hypnotist, techniquing, and director of Sacred Pathways Center for Hypnosis. Her interest in UFOs and contact began in 1961 when her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had a close encounter. Subsequent abduction in New Hampshire White Mountains. She's a generational experiencer. There's lots there, isn't there?
Yes.
Please welcome Kathleen to the show. Hello there.
Hello. Great to be with you again.
I think it's about 23 last time you was on, a couple of years ago.
Was it? Uh-huh.
Yeah, it soon goes by.
I know. Sure flies by.
Yeah, but it's always interesting when we talk to you. You know, and I love talking with you and about your aunt and various other things. Please give us an overview of Betty and Barney Hill's experience on the night of September the 19th, 1961.
Well, Betty and Barney were on a vacation trip to Niagara Falls in upstate New York and then to Montreal. And they were returning home at night through the White Mountains of New Hampshire when this light in the sky suddenly swooped down and it was moving erratically. They were in a remote area called Franconia Notch when it hovered only a couple of thousand feet in the air. It was rotating. It was silent. It appeared to be lighted on only one side because when it rotated, there was this blip that happened. So that's how they knew that it was rotating. They stopped the car and they looked at it. And then it started moving erratically, bouncing back and forth in the sky. In fact, Barney compared it to a yo-yo, how the yo-yo will go out and then it will come back.
Oh, yeah.
It reminds me of the ping pong ball effect that the military officers are talking about now when they have observed craft up close. That kind of effect, arcing back and forth, or going out in a straight line and then zooming back, that kind of thing. So they watched that. Barney was a confirmed skeptic. He couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. And he was a little bit rattled by this. They got back into the car and Barney was driving while Betty was watching through binoculars. And they left the Franconia Notch area, which is an area where the mountains come closer together than any other place in upstate New Hampshire that I can think of. And then they opened up to the valley. And as they went into the valley, there were hotels, motels, cabins. I shouldn't say hotels because, in 1961 in upstate New Hampshire, it was not heavily populated. They had seasonal tourists who came and stayed in cabins or just the beginning of motels back then. So they're in this tourist area, but it was September. The tourists didn't come until October to the leaf peepers out to see the foliage in the fall. So the leaves were still green on the trees when Betty and Barney went through. on September 19. They're in this area, this tourist area called Lincoln, when the craft surges ahead and hovers directly to the left, to the right, to the west side of the highway as they were heading south. And Barney had to stop the car in the middle of the road, straddling the center line, so that he wouldn't be directly underneath this craft. And it was only a couple of 100 feet in the air, and it had stopped rotating. And they could see a row of lights, and they could see a little red light on each side of this. Barney got his binoculars, which were on the seat, stepped out of the car and looked up at this craft. He's resting his elbows on the top of the car. Right. And the car's vibrating a little bit, so he brought the binoculars down, and as he went to look up again, the craft then shifted location. It crossed directly in front of him and Betty, who was still in the passenger seat. So he followed this craft to, there was a field. There were apple trees. There was a farmer's stand where he would sell apples in the fall, that sort of thing. And the craft now was hovering only about 50 feet off the ground and about 100 feet away. Barney held the binoculars up to his eyes, looking at the craft, and he could see figures looking back at him.
Oh, God.
In the original NICAP report that they filed, the letter that they wrote on September 26, only 5 days after they had this sighting. Betty was the typist. She wrote that Barney had observed figures dressed in black, shiny uniforms, and that he had become extraordinarily upset, distressed by what he saw, and that they were seeking help. So that's what they wrote only 5 days after they had this occurrence, which it was now about midnight on September 20th. That's why I say 5 days, okay, instead of 6. So anyway, Barney is looking up at these figures. All of a sudden, one remains at the window of the craft and all of the others move in military precision, just a precise move, turn and move to what appears to be a panel on the back of this corridor that seems to be encircling the outer edge of this craft. Barney could now see them. They were about the size of a pencil held at arm's length. That's the way they looked to him as he looked up at the craft. And from that distance and through binoculars, he could see the black, shiny uniforms. He could see the one standing at the window. And he felt that this one was wearing a cap on his head and a scarf. Now, I think that Barney made a mistake here because of the authenticated photographs that I have and that I have seen of these non-humans. They're wearing headgear. They're wearing some kind of technological device on their head.
Right.
Which can be mistaken for like a military cap or that kind of cap and a scarf because it comes down. So anyway, he looked up, he's looking at this. When the arms went up of the crew members, is what I'll call them, the little red lights on the sides of the craft started to move out on fin-like structures. And then this entity's looking down at Barney, just staring at him. He frightened Barney terribly.
Me too.
And suddenly something started to drop down out of the bottom of that craft. And when that happened, Barney became so terrified that he pulled the binoculars away from his eyes so forcefully that he broke the leather strap and went running back to the car. Betty could hear his feet on the pavement, and he threw the binoculars on the seat of the car and closed the door. He had left the car running. The interior light was on, and until he closed the door. And then he went speeding down the highway, because as he was approaching the car, that craft was moving back in his direction. Within less than a minute, maybe, or a little more than a minute, Betty and Barney heard a series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the car. Barney compared it to the sound of a tuning fork being dropped.
Right.
Kind of sound. Yeah. And they wondered what that could possibly be. Betty rolled down her window and looked up, but she couldn't see the craft. She was looking for lights. She couldn't see any lights. All she saw was darkness, like blackness. The stars were concealed. They were above. The craft must have been right over the top of the car when this was happening. And then Betty and Barney didn't know what happened. All of a sudden, there was a doorway amnesia. They felt the car vibrate when these sounds were being made on the trunk. They felt a very strong kind of electrical tingling sensation passing through their bodies. Maybe some kind of electromagnetic energy or something like that.
Yeah.
And then their memory has them in a new location. There are tall trees all around. They're on a dirt road. They don't know how they arrived there, but they assumed they must have been driving. We'll never be able to answer that question. But they saw a red, fiery orb that appeared to be sitting on the ground. They saw a roadblock. There were men standing in the road. They drove up and they had to stop. Well, they didn't just have to stop it. No. The engine died. They stopped the car and then the engine died. And these men standing in the road started to approach Betty and Barney. Now, we're not talking about conscious recall now. They remembered, let me clarify, they remembered the roadblock. They remembered the dirt road. They remembered the fiery orb. It was part of their conscious, vague memories.
Right, yeah.
But they did not remember those entities approaching the car. And when they approached, they found out a couple of years later when they underwent a series of hypnosis sessions with Dr. Benjamin Simon, they found out that these were these non-human entities. Barney had turned to Betty and said, they were talking, was this an accident ahead? What was happening? And suddenly Barney realized when he saw them that they were the ones that he saw on board that craft as he was looking through binoculars at the craft hovering over the field. And now here they are about 8 or 12 miles away from their previous location in a new area. And these entities are standing in the road. They come to both sides of the car. Betty becomes terrified. She's so frightened. She's never been this frightened in her entire life. She decides to open the door and run into the woods and hide. But she doesn't have that opportunity. She put her hand on the door handle. They opened the door. They were standing there. The one in the front was holding some kind of a device in his hand.
Right.
I'm trying to measure it. A device in his hand, like a little wand of sorts, or maybe the size of a flashlight, something like that. He pointed it at her, and she lost consciousness. From Barney's perspective, he opened the door. He decided not to go for his gun because he was afraid he would be harmed.
Yeah.
He put his foot on the ground, and they assisted him out of the car. They elevated his body. So as he is being moved along, only the toes of his shoes are bumping against the rocks. Betty felt that she was walking. I don't know if this was a false memory under hypnosis or if she was actually elevated too.
Right.
That's something we'll never know.
No.
Just speculation. After having investigated this, finding out about it when I was in 61, when I was 13, the day after.
Oh, God, yeah, young.
Seeing the evidence initially, following through these hypnosis sessions when Dr. Simon permitted them to remember what they said, because he had reinstated amnesia during their sessions. They had 6 months of sessions. But to get back to what happened, Betty, as they took her to the craft, fought for her life. She regained consciousness. She was not going to go onto that craft. She was fighting them, and when she did, she tore the lining in her dress, the hem down on one side and the stitching in the lining. They took her onto the craft, into a room. They took Barney into the craft, and when they did, he remembered under hypnosis that now his toes felt different. His shoes had been bumping a lot along the rocks, but now they slid up a ramp and they bumped over some kind of elevated structure as they took him into the craft. They took them to separate examining rooms. Betty was examined first. It appears there was only one examiner and one leader, who was probably the one at the window.
Yeah.
When Barney was looking up at the craft from the field in Lincoln. They did pretty much the same examinations on Betty and Barney, only one of them was more female and one of them was more male oriented. All sorts of samples were taken from their bodies. Also, for Betty, she was placed on a table. The examiner attempted to remove her dress, but didn't know how to operate a zipper. He tore the stitching. I still have, I donated that dress to the University of New Hampshire.
Oh,
and
look.
it's preserved there in an archival collection that I donated to the University of New Hampshire.
Oh, how nice.
Yes, I have started an online archive on my website at kathleen-marden.com. So anyway, Betty's dress is torn. She had to assist the examiner in removing her dress because he had broken the zipper, torn out the stitching. Just she couldn't wear that dress again. She never wore it after that day. And then they put her on the examining table, continued the examination of her nervous system, she thought, her musculoskeletal system, her joints. And then the examiner produced a very large needle. And she said, what are you going to do with that? Telepathically, or maybe she spoke it, but she felt like she could hear them, but she later decided that all communication from them was telepathic.
Right.
So anyway, she asked what he was doing. He said, oh, it's just a simple kind of reproductive test. She understood it as pregnancy. And she said, don't do it, it will hurt. And he said, it won't hurt. And he plunged it into her abdomen,
Oh, God.
creating so much pain and trauma that Dr. Simon had to end the session early. But just before he ended it, the one that she called the leader, which I now know is more than just a leader of a team. This is the individual who remains with experiencers throughout their lifetime. They form a relationship with this non-human.
All right.
And he did something to remove Betty's pain. And so she was very grateful to him. The session ended, and in the next session with Dr. Simon, Betty was now finished. She had put her dress back on, and she was looking around the craft. She opened a book. She saw alien symbols in that book. In the year 2000, I asked her to sketch those alien symbols for me. No one had ever done that before.
No.
I kept those symbols in a locked file cabinet, and I published them for the first time in Captured. And lo and behold, Dr. Don C. Donderi, Dr. Stuart Appel, and Bud Hopkins assisted, did 2 alien symbol studies. And Dr. Donderi compared Betty's symbols to the ones that he and Dr. Appel had collected from Bud Hopkins. And these symbols were nearly identical to what Bud had been collecting.
Oh, right.
In the mid-1970s. So, yeah, that's another piece of scientific evidence. Betty was shown a star map. She said to the leader, I know you're not from around here. Where are you from? Where's your home port? And so he showed her a star map. And under hypnosis, Dr. Benjamin Simon asked her to sketch this map when she went home over the next couple of weeks, if it didn't trouble her too badly, and
Right.
if she could do it accurately, if she could remember it precisely. So she did. And that became part of another scientific study. And the people, the scientists, the original scientists went to great effort and could only make this identification after we had made scientific progress and we had better distance data. It took several years for her to actually get a match for Betty's map because we didn't have accurate distance data. The stars on that map had special properties. They were all sun-like properties, although only 5% of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood were sun-like, out 54 light years. So the story goes on and on. Barney was examined as well. It's very similar to Betty's examination, not as extensive, but this tends to happen when one person is the primary contactee or abductee, and they have a spouse or a significant other with them who is also taken. But Barney did reveal a great deal of information under hypnosis. It's all in my book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, with Stanton T. Friedman that I updated with new scientific evidence evaluation in 2021. So I see you have a question.
Yeah, there's a question for Kathleen. Did the authorities disbelieve Betty and Barney's sighting report, and did it make more difficult for them due to their interracial relationship?
Okay, well, initially, Pease Air Force Base was very interested in this report. The Paul Henderson, who interviewed them, was very interested in and treated it respectfully. The original report tells everything that I told you that happened before their hypnosis session, but Barney left out the part about the non-human entities looking back at him because he didn't want to sound like a crackpot.
Yeah,
Now, Barney was, they both had excellent reputations. They were active in their community, in the state of New Hampshire, in civil rights, human rights, just, really good people. And so they didn't want to lose their reputations. They insisted that all of this information remain confidential, not to be released to the public. It was okay for military officers to know and for scientists to know. And my family knew, and their close friends knew. We were all sworn to secrecy. So, and then Walter Webb, who was an astronomer at the Hayden Planetarium in Boston, Massachusetts, interviewed Betty and Barney for a period of 6 hours, both separately and then together. And he wrote a report for the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And then after the hypnosis, he wrote a more extensive report. And I interviewed Walter during my research. He gave me his correspondence files with Betty and Barney. So I was very pleased to have them as part of my collection. And they're at the University of New Hampshire, I believe. I'm pretty sure I put them up there.
Yeah.
And so Walter told me that if the first sighting occurred, which there were more than a dozen witnesses to the event that night. If that occurred, and I have that all documented too, right, then he believes that there's no reason to disbelieve that they were actually abducted. That's what he told me. There were others who investigated from NICAP. Robert Homan and C.D. Jackson, two engineers from IBM, investigated. Their Betty's and Barney's friend from Pease Air Force Base, recently retired from the CIA. Well, you never retire from the CIA, but but supposedly recently retired, also was extraordinarily interested in what happened to Betty and Barney. So initially there was all of this interest from the military, from Rear Admiral Herbert Knowles from the Navy, and those people who had confidential contact with Betty and Barney, it appears, believed the investigators who did the scientific investigations after this happened back in the 1960s. Before I became an investigator, I was a member of the family who was very curious and interested. My favorite book was Nancy Drew. So girl detective. So I was like a girl.
I like that.
So
there's another question here.
Yeah.
Have any members of your family been abducted or had UFO or alien experiences?
There is reason to believe that this has been intergenerational in my family. In fact, when Betty was doing a series of contact experiments with C.D. Jackson and Robert Hohmann, those two scientists from IBM.
Right.
She was trying to call in a craft to land on my grandparents' farm. I grew up across the street from my grandparents. There were two observers to a craft coming in to land that night, hovering just above the trees. My mother and I were taken to craft that night. We never made this public. I, in fact, have only spoken about it a little bit in the UFO community. Probably because of the ridicule factor, the debunkers, disinformants will use this as a reason to say that I'm delusional, just like my aunt.
Yeah,
Ridiculous
yeah.
explanation, even though my investigations have been scientific investigations. My background is in social science. I worked with nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman. We wrote 3 books together. One of those books was Captured. Bruce Maccabee, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, optical physicist for the Navy, vetted my work. Linda Moulton Howe, famous UFO researcher, journalist, vetted my work. And Stanton Friedman vetted my work in that book. It is accurate. But there will always be detractors. But my mother and I were taken. It was extraordinarily traumatic for both of us.
Another little question here. I wonder if the authorities had caught something on radar.
Yes, there were 2 radar reports from that night. You can read the details about the radar reports in my book, Captured. One of those was in North Concord, Vermont, the radar station up there. And there was a very large erratic object moving erratically against the wind that night. The Air Force wrote it off as a weather balloon. Show me a weather balloon that's capable of moving against the wind. Also, Pease Air Force Base captured on radar craft coming in low toward the target and then moving up. They wrote that off as an atmospheric inversion, which, if you'll read the NICAP reports, they were just summarily dismissing cases. Not NICAP, the Air Force reports, the Project Blue Book reports during that time frame. They were summarily dismissing almost every case as a weather balloon or a temperature inversion or something like that. So I put no credence in the official pronouncements regarding what it was, nor did Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And he wrote the preface to Captured.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I've got a question here. What impact did the dreams in the weeks after have on your understanding of the encounter?
Well, Betty had 5 dreams. They began 10 days after their UFO encounter in the White Mountains. The dreams were out of order. They contained information that Betty and Barney had both remembered and had already reported. But they also included information about a UFO abduction and these non-humans. Well, as a social scientist, I know that dreams can contain real information, biographical memories, particularly when they occur in the morning immediately before a person wakes up. And that's when Betty had these dreams. But they also include fantasy material. So my interpretation, or my professional understanding, evaluation of Betty's dreams is that they contained, as she said, information that had already been documented in the reports of what occurred. Then they had this fantasy material. The ETs that were standing in the road, when were the ones that Barney actually had conscious memories of observing. But the ones that Betty dreamed about looked like Jimmy Durante in cadets uniforms. They didn't look anything like the non-humans but that was Betty's mind trying to accept this, because we work out our anxieties in our dreams. And so these were a series of dreams that helped Betty to overcome her level of anxiety about what occurred. It turned into something nicer, something more friendly than the terrible, terrible experience that they were trying to deal with. And I want to say, before people think I'm saying there were lab rats and this was all horrific, it was not. In fact, it was the lack of understanding of what was occurring, that lack of knowledge, and all of the mystery of all of this, the evidence that that you can't explain. You don't know specifically how that happened. The deep scrapes in Barney's best dress shoes that happened when he was being dragged or elevated, but his clothes were touching the ground. All of those things can be extraordinarily distressing. Barney looking up at that craft and seeing non-humans for the first time as a confirmed skeptic scared the wits out of him. Scared him so badly that he developed a mental block. It's that kind of thing. After the hypnosis, Dr. Simon said to Barney, and I have this on audio recordings, "Now, Barney, tell me, do you believe that you were kidnapped?" And Barney said, "No, I do not believe that it was a kidnapping, because when you're kidnapped, I think of a person being harmed, but I was not harmed," he said. Betty and Barney were reassured by these non-humans that they would not be harmed, that they only needed to do a few simple tests, and then they would be back on the highway on their way home.
If I'm going to say about these dreams, was Barney's dream totally different from Betty's dream then? And if so,
Barney didn't have a series of dreams like Betty.
Right.
And, or if he did, he didn't remember them. And I think that this contributed to Barney's level of trauma, where Barney eventually developed bleeding ulcers, high blood pressure. He was hospitalized for the bleeding ulcers that would not recede to traditional medical treatment. And this was the reason that he was referred first to a psychiatrist in Exeter, New Hampshire. And then as they talked about Barney's memories, how he and my aunt had gone up to the White Mountains to try to retrace their route to find this spot somewhere on a dirt road with tall trees all around, where they saw that fiery orb and the roadblock. As they went up there over and over again in late 1961, in 62, and in 1963, Barney thought of this more and more. It weighed heavily on his mind and apparently on his health as well. And so this psychiatrist in New Hampshire referred Barney to Dr. Benjamin Simon in Boston. Ben Simon was a renowned neuropsychiatrist. During World War II, he had set up the neuropsychiatric ward at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island. He was a colonel in the military. And the veterans who had shell shock or conversion hysteria were coming to Mason General Hospital and being treated by Dr. Simon. And he had more success than any other psychiatrist because he had developed a special type of deep trance hypnosis where he could get to the root of the matter and help these veterans to overcome these physiological and psychological symptoms that were keeping them away from their families, away from their jobs, and in this hospital. For Barney, Dr. Simon was wonderful because Barney recovered completely from this life-threatening condition.
How did their lives, after all this, when they settled back down into life, what were they like as a couple?
Well, they were a very happy couple. I, as a kid in my teenage years, wanted, if I ever got married, I wanted to have the kind of relationship that Betty and Barney had. They had an extraordinarily happy and supportive marriage. They had the same interests. They were very bright. Barney's IQ was 140, Betty's 135. They actively involved in the civil rights movement, as I mentioned earlier. After the therapy, Barney was appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. They worked for voters' rights in the state of New Hampshire. They helped to set up the Rockingham County Community Action Program through the Federal Office of Economic Opportunity. Barney was the chairman of the committee that did that and received an award from Sergeant Shriver, who was the head of the project in Washington, D.C. So they were very active in the community. They were, very upstanding. They were speaking all over the state of New Hampshire. Barney walked with Dr. Martin Luther King. But this was before any of this information was revealed to the public.
Oh.
Once it was revealed to the public, everything changed. Betty and Barney didn't want that to happen. It appeared in a series of newspaper articles in the fall of 1965. John Luttrell, an award-winning reporter for the Boston Traveler, wrote the articles. He did an excellent job at investigation. He contacted the Air Force and had extensive records. He even acquired information regarding an Air Force cover-up that he wrote about in those articles. I still have the articles.
Oh, good.
Yes. So wonderful, wonderful. He did terrific work.
There's another question here. What would I love to know is, do the government still catch UFOs on radar? Because it's not really spoke about nowadays. I don't believe they're all of a sudden all UFOs have cloaked.
Well, I'm not certain if they're using radar. Well, yes, they are still using radar. Come to think of it, because think of the Tic Tac. That was the most sophisticated radar system in the world. That's what they claim. The United States claims to have the most sophisticated military equipment. This was a military radar on an Air Force jet, fighter jet, and also the aircraft carrier below. And that's the Tic Tac UFO that you can see on YouTube. There have been UFOs visually sighted and caught on radar off the East Coast. So the information is being revealed. In fact, the the congressional U.S. Congressional Committee on UFOs met yesterday in Washington, D.C. And there were more witnesses who gave sworn testimony about their knowledge of UFOs. Up until now, they've interviewed military officers and scientists. This time, they interviewed George Knapp, and George Knapp is a mainstream, highly esteemed reporter in Las Vegas, Nevada, and also has had a long-term interest in UFOs. And he was one who testified, and he testified about going to the Soviet Union back in the 1990s and how he met with the Soviet military, the officers, and he was able to acquire their files on UFOs, and he was able to smuggle them out of the USSR back then. And he has turned them over now to the US government. So that's a major step. I mean, the people who have testified under oath are honorable people, very honorable people, giving sworn testimony under oath, like you would in a court of law, to tell the truth.
Yes.
And what they're seeing, some of them will say, well, we don't know what it is. Perhaps it belongs to some country on this planet. But others who are more knowledgeable and more willing to speak say, this is technology that we do not possess. This technology has been demonstrated for years by these craft. Dating back to the 1940s, they could outfly and outmaneuver anything that we had on this planet. So some people are willing to say this. Some people are willing to talk about their personal experiences. Those who reveal the most significant evidence end up being vilified. Their computers get hacked. Their lives get threatened. And Congress has sworn that they are going to try to protect these people. They're going to try to undo the damage that has been done to their reputations. One man who testified yesterday said that he has not been able to get a job in his field since he gave testimony.
It's terrible, isn't it? Terrible.
It is terrible
when you get threatened like that.
Yes.
Another question I want to ask you is, what common messages have experiences been given by non-humans then?
The messages, and this goes back into the 1950s in cases that I've investigated. The Betty's and Barney's was the first scientifically investigated case. These cases in the 50s were not investigated back then, but I investigated them myself. Messages are concern over our environment, our failure to be good stewards to our environment, environmental pollution, the food that we put into our bodies being contaminated, our nuclear experiments, detonations, above ground detonations, spewing nuclear waste back in the 1950s into the atmosphere that carried around the world, actually, but across this country, and even affected the milk that we as kids were drinking. It rained down onto the fields. The cows ate the contaminated grass, and then we drank the milk. That the ETs didn't say that. I read that in a scientific study. But that's what the ETs were talking about. this contamination. We know about the cancer epidemic in this country. Most of the kids that I grew up with have thyroid disorders. I don't, fortunately. I didn't like milk. But a lot of those big milk drinkers, consumers of dairy products, have problems now.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. When you talk about these visitors from other places, are they positive or negative with us?
Let me first say, to protect myself, that most people who have these experiences have initial trauma that they have to work through, because these non-humans are not like us. They're so different. Their appearance is different. The way they communicate is different. The way they can paralyze us, the way they can do medical studies on us. I believe that those studies are because they're thinking of us as an endangered species. But anyway, so initially there is this trauma that you have to work through. I believe that you cannot work through this trauma with a UFO investigation and interrogation unless you have someone doing this who is empathetic toward you and wants to collect your evidence and help you to collect evidence. Once you work with somebody who helps you through this trauma, then you have a different perspective on this. You begin to want to know more about them. You become curious. You're probably going to be taken more than one time. If you learn to be more on an equal footing with them, to communicate with them, which I discovered you can do by initially projecting love telepathically toward them, then they're going to respond in a kinder manner. Over time, experiencers who are taken time and time again become more accustomed to this and learn more and engage in communication with these non-humans. So I became very interested in communication studies, and I actually wrote a book on this called Forbidden Knowledge. So you can purchase that book. I updated it in 2025, actually. So you can purchase that book from Amazon. It's available in all formats, just like Captured on Amazon. And I think Barnes and Noble too. But pick those books up because there's a great deal of information in both of them about communication.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. That is what you're saying there, communication.
Yes.
With these non-human entities.
Yeah. And if you are an experiencer and you're attempting to process this information and you just can't find anyone to help you who's kind and caring, but scientific at the same time, you can be both. You don't have to be a military interrogator,
No.
that kind of thing, or a kind, caring person. You can be both. I have been both. So you can purchase my book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. And this book is written specifically for people who are attempting to process their events.
That's interesting, that is. And that'd be probably a good read. What's your latest research then? What you're looking into the future then?
I'm still trying to find out to get a better grasp on what these ETs are doing and why. What is their specific agenda? Yeah. I've gotten a lot of information through experiencers, through a communication experiment that I was a researcher on and an experimenter. that I wrote about. So also, I think that evidence is important, the collection of evidence. I'm looking through all of my materials now. Maybe I'll write a book on everything that I have learned during my many, many years of research and investigation, and the cases that some of the major cases that I investigated, which I haven't spoken about before. Dr. Melanie Barton Bragg and I have completed our research study on extraterrestrials, UFOs, and religious belief. So we are working on the statistical analysis of that. We have a college professor who is helping us with that. We're going to meet with him tomorrow. So I'm also that. Rice University, I've signed a contract with them so that eventually my archival collection will go there.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
I'm going through there. I want my entire collection in a respectable university archive for future researchers.
Hey, Kathleen, before we go anyway, all these people have encounters. Do you think we are chosen individually?
Do I think we are chosen? I believe that initially they worked randomly, that they picked up a host of people. And if those people possessed the characteristics that they were looking for, that they continued to take them intergenerationally along family lines. This is something my research bears out over and over and over again. There are those who were taken only once, but I guess they were rejects. They didn't have those characteristics, apparently. So, but this is what I am seeing.
I can imagine so, because it does seem to run in families. Your mom, your grandfather, or their great had seen something, and then
Right.
just something. Yeah.
Not just in mine. In most families where people are taken over an extended period of time, maybe over a lifetime.
And I presume it'll carry on until whatever's going to happen in the future.
Yes, yeah. And who knows what that's going to be. I hope that the ETs are successful because they are, apparently concerned about our survival.
I think they are as well. I agree with you there as well. Because we're just blowing each other up. They must look at us sometimes and think, what the hell is happening here? I know, because I think they want to come back to Earth for some reason, for minerals or whatever they want. But they must look and think, by golly, how do we stop these people from fighting?
Right. Because they've observed this, if they have been here since the beginning of time, as some people's research seems to bear out, the ancient scrolls, the biblical records that haven't even been included in the Bible, that kind of thing, seems to bear out the idea that we were visited in the ancient past. And they saw primitives. They're still seeing primitives. We're still warlike. Look at the murders around the world through military assaults and through gang wars, through drug wars. If I were an ET looking at this planet, I would be concerned.
I would as well, yeah, because there might come a time when there'll be no left of this planet. What they're going to do then?
Right.
I presume, do you think we are part alien then?
Boy, that's pretty wild speculation, but I have read that there is genetic evidence that we, at one point in our history, underwent a change in our DNA. That it was altered. It was sort of like we received an upgrade. And I'm wondering if that's happening again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But just about run out of time.
Oh, that went quickly.
I know it always does. Where can people get your books?
Well, people who are overseas outside the United States can get my books. There are many online bookstores. All of mine are available on Amazon in every format that you can imagine. People in the United States can get autographed copies of my books from my website at kathleen-marden.com, but it's way too expensive to send them via the mail outside the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting more and more expensive inside the United States.
It is over here as well. For people to post books from here to the United States is getting expensive as well.
Mm-hmm. But you can get all of my books. You can see them on my website, my 7 books. I'm working on, I'm working on another book. I have all the inside information and evidence on my aunt.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
No one knows this. I'm writing about that.
It's always a pleasure having you on my show. It's always fascinating. It's nice, but people in chat room ask questions as well.
Yes, and thank you everyone for asking questions, very interesting questions, and it's always so enjoyable to chat with you as well.
Thank you so much. My guest on Friday is, just bear with me a minute. Right. Jeremiah Alexandra and Jeremiah Osman and Alexandra Colwell. They're looking to Bigfoot. They've never been on my show before, so I think it's going to be a really fascinating show with them two on Friday the 12th at 2 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Pacific, and 7 p.m. in the UK. So thank you again, Kathleen. You take care.
My pleasure. You too.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Everybody in the chat room saying, thank you, Kathleen. Great show and fabulous guest, Bob. Thank you so much for your time tonight. They've all said that. Yeah. So thank you again from the UK.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. Just finish the show.